This is Lama Tantrapa. Welcome to Mastery Dojo, the podcast brought to you by Academy of Qidao and Mastery Dojo website, bringing to you some of the top experts in Qigong, Tai Chi, and related disciplines, all under one roof. Mastery Dojo is also an online community and repository of amazing materials dedicated to mastery. Today, I am delighted to introduce my colleague and apprentice, Sheldon Callahan. Thank you, Sheldon, for being here with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Sheldon is a Kung Fu master of the Shaolin tradition and also a practitioner of Tai Chi and Qigong and several other martial arts, plus a technologist, a musician, and an amazing human being. This is really great to feature you, Sheldon, as our Master of the Month. Now, before we jump into questions that I wanted to ask you about mastery, maybe you can give us a brief couple of minutes overview of where you're coming from and why you are a Master of the Month today.
I have been studying mastery in different disciplines for a very long time. My background is in Shaolin Kung Fu. I started studying Shaolin at the age of 16. I was fortunate enough to train from many martial masters, including the Shaolin monks of the Shaolin Temple, when they came and started a temple in the Bay Area of California. I became their student, apprentice, and then I was selected to run the temple as they went off and pursued other pursuits. I've been running this temple for 20 years now. It's been a long time. A lot of time to work on mastery. When I became the director of the temple, I had to seek out more masters in order to improve my skills. So I've been on this long journey of mastery that still continues to this day.
Well, that's a beautiful way of looking at it, that it's a journey of mastery. It's not a journey to mastery, as some people think of mastery as some kind of a destination at the end of a long journey, kind of like enlightenment. I'm going to get enlightened one day, and from that point on, it's all hunky-dory. Well, we know that after the most profound awakenings, we all tend to fall asleep again. And mastery also, it goes through ebbs and flows, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a never-ending process. And I think of it more as a mindset more than it is, like you said, a destination. There's a certain way of thinking that allows you to gain understanding.
Indeed. Last year, we created an online summit dedicated to resilience. It was the World Resilience Summit. And one of my questions for you is actually based on the topic of resilience. You often talk about resilience as something that you train for, not something that you hope for. How did your martial arts and Qigong practice shape your way that you respond to pressure in business or in leadership?
Yeah, I think that it allowed me to be less reactive because reactive puts you in a lot of compromising positions that you end up having to do a lot of work to get out of. If you're able to, instead of react, respond appropriately to a situation, then you can be more resilient to the situation. Being hopeful about that happening is not going to happen. You actually have to train those muscles in order to have the right responses to stress. Can you imagine if the Navy SEALs we're just going to send these guys in, we're not going to train them, we're not going to do boot camp, we're not going to do ongoing training, and just send them into a situation and hope for the best.
We're going to do some affirmations. Yeah,
Yeah,
affirmations are going
yeah,
to
we're
help
going
the
to
Navy
affirm
SEAL.
it. It's going to happen. So because of that, they train people to be resilient and also pick people who can be resilient. I think that everybody has the capacity for it, but not everybody is willing to commit to the work it takes to continue that training or work to get better at it. It's not a given, it's a thing that you build.
Yes, one of the aspects of resilience is perseverance. In other words, sticking with your project. If the project is personal development and self-improvement, if you stick with it, you may actually improve. I can totally relate to what you're saying about Navy SEALs. I didn't serve in the Navy, but I served in the Army Special Forces. And basically, the procedure is very similar, more fighting. But the idea of training for resilience actually doesn't stop with martial arts. It applies to business, it applies to personal relationships, it applies to politics, where it doesn't apply.
Right. And that's why there's less people on the leadership track than on the followership track, because you have to have a certain level of resilience to shoulder the responsibility, trials, and the tribulations and the hard times from leadership. I think a lot of people think of leadership as this thing they want to do to tell people what they want to do, not that all responsibility lies with you. And I think that it's a different thing. More people would rather not do that. If you think about people who decide to be in leadership for reasons of self-development, making change, those people have to be resilient in order to take on that kind of responsibility.
Well, to quote Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. Your work at the intersection of ancient traditions and modern technologies gives you a unique perspective. How do you decide what should be automated in your work and what must remain human, given that
Yeah,
AI is nowadays taking over jobs and a lot of people just relegate responsibility to it? What's your take?
Yeah, I think if you want to automate something, you need to learn how to do it manually. That's the only way you can automate it. Otherwise, there's a lot of waste in that process. Understanding something at its fundamental level and then relegating or delegating that to maybe an automated system would be helpful. Like an example is everybody talks about reinventing the wheel. Don't reinvent the wheel. Well, if you're building wheels, you should reinvent the wheel
And
and
you'll never forget
understand.
how the wheel works if
Yeah,
you
you'll never
reinvented
forget.
it. So it's like an inner knowledge instead of the outside, it's your insight.
Yeah. And once you understand that fundamentally, then opportunities for automation of that come together. Then you can tune your machines or your automation to fit the understanding that you have so you can get the efficiencies out of it. Like when I'm working with technology teams, we have to break down the process to its fundamental things before we can automate it. What is the thing that you're trying to do? Because a lot of times you'll create automation that becomes a bridge to nowhere or a snake eating its own tail. And so to avoid those kind of things, you really have to understand things at a fundamental level and be able to break it down. That's also part of mastery is how do I break down the components of a thing, understand it at its fundamental level, and then from there I can extrapolate.
Well, I agree. And I have to say that over a dozen years ago, probably 14 years ago, I invented a strategy game based on the ancient classical game of Go. For the longest time, I was trying to find someone who would be able to create this game for me based on my directions. Everyone was telling me, oh, this would be ridiculously expensive. It's going to cost you 25 to $50,000 to hire software engineers, maybe even more than one, because one needs to understand the geometry and topography of a sphere. Another one needs to understand the game dynamics. Another one needs to understand software programming to make this all work as a game. And so I was just sitting and waiting for something to change. And sure enough, with the advent of AI, something changed. I actually just created a game using a platform called Replit. So for our viewers and
Yeah.
listeners, this is a strategy game that now you can play on our website on masterydojo.com. At the basic level, it's free. There are also more sophisticated ways to play it, but at the basic level, it's free of charge. And the best thing about it, I didn't have to code it. I didn't have to spend $50,000 to hire a software engineer. I just wrote in plain English the description of how it should work. What's the game dynamics should be, what would make the person a winner or loser, and then the system went into work. I have no idea how it did it, but the results are pretty remarkable. It's
That
good to
that
know
that
how things work, but sometimes you
that
don't
that
really
actually
need to
goes
know
to a
all the
different
technology.
that goes to a different point. I think when we're talking about gaining mastery over a particular subject, that's when reinventing the wheel is there. But there's a different way that you can look at things as well, and that's from the lens of a director, right? If you think of someone like James Cameron, he understands fundamentally how visual effects work. He is not a visual effects artist himself. He doesn't going in and pushing pixels. He understands who needs to be there, what things need to happen. That's kind of becoming almost like a conductor in the symphony. They may be a virtuoso on one instrument, but they understand music theory, they understand the music, they understand how to read music, they understand all the fundamental things. So your ability to write down, that's a key to manifesting. Being able to take something out of your mind and put it into the physical world in a way that describes it thoroughly. If you can do
Mm.
that, then anything can be built from that. And when I'm working with software teams, it doesn't start with us writing code or sitting down in front of a computer. It starts with the concept. We need to write down all of the requirements that it needs to do. From that, we can get to anything. I think about all the great sci-fi writers who predicted the future that we're in right now. It wasn't that they knew exactly how it was going to work. They didn't need to know the details at that level, but they knew that we'd be able to communicate like this,
Well, I
right?
hope that James Cameron did not predict the future perfectly with his Terminator movies.
Yeah, I was thinking more like Space Odyssey 2001. This whole concept of video to video was in Star Trek, was in these kind of movies. All these people were predicting some of the technologies that we have today. Even way before this, the idea of automation or robotics has been around for a long time, even in the Ottoman Empire with the mechanical Turk, right? This concept is an old idea. It starts at the idea level and then it goes up. If I'm building a car, maybe if I'm the tire person, I need to know everything about the tire. But if I'm looking at it from the standpoint of the company building car, I need to know the tire person. I need to know what he's capable of and what his advances are. And I might even tell him I need tires that allow me to spin the car in 360 degrees without moving. How can you do that? I need the engineer over here. I need to know what it takes. And if that becomes automated in any way by some other system and it's reliable, then I can rely on that. All the computers we have right now are not made by Apple or Microsoft. They're sourcing components from people who have perfected that component. Oh, you got a new hard drive that can do this. Okay, I'm going to put that component in. And then I know enough about it that I can interface with it.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the beauty of it that now the complex things, whether it's machines or complex ideas and philosophies, can be broken down into basic fundamental building blocks. And those building blocks and principles are essentially what we need to have mastery of.
Yes.
Once we have mastery of building blocks or mastery of the principles, for example, underlying martial arts, then we can put them to good use and actually have something workable. Otherwise, it's not really effective art. I'm sure there are some science fiction stories where people came up with brilliant ideas but ended up with just a bunch of junk instead of robots.
I think a lot of times when they get really specific, thinking from the time period they are in now, they tend to paint themselves into a corner. When you go back and watch some of the sci-fi and you're like, yeah, it doesn't work that way. But in their mind, in order to have a screen that shows another person, maybe, I don't know how they perceive it at the time. I think sometimes understanding the bigger picture is more
I'm still
important.
waiting
And
for the
especially,
holodeck, from Star Trek, though.
yeah, it's coming. It's coming. It's definitely coming. I wanted to say something about something that you said, and this is the key to my practice of mastery. It is the principles. How do the principles show up? What are the principles first? How do they show up in everything? And then you can learn across discipline. Because a lot of times I think people are having a hard time connecting the dots between this discipline and this discipline. So I'm involved in a lot of different disciplines, like you said, music, martial arts, technology, filmmaking, all of these different things. The principles of these things go across the board. And so I just look for the principles first. And then from the principles, I look for the specificity of the system because the systems are always based off principles. And then systems produce patterns, and those patterns are recognizable. So if I need to understand something from the pattern part all the way up to the principle, or if I understand the principle, I can go all the way down to the pattern. So that way I can have a convergence of understanding.
Absolutely. That's just a great testimonial of the importance of principles, which is something that a lot of people, both in martial arts and in Qigong, don't really quite grok for whatever reason. So I've been on this crusade for the last 30 plus years of talking about principles first and foremost. The forms should follow function. When it comes to human beings, principles are often considered what we call values. The principled person is the person who upholds his or her values. Now, what would you say about the values as a structural core of not only human development, but also organizational development? What happens when organizations or companies treat values as just branding instead of operating system? And
Well,
how do
then they become aspirational, like that affirmation you talked about earlier. Let's hope for the best. I think a lot of times I've seen them applied in something that everybody likes the idea of the value more than they want to live the idea of the value. Sometimes what that will make you do is like, oh, in this situation, I could cut corners and get something done really fast, but that goes against my values. If it's really your value, you'll say, okay, I'm not going to cut the corner. I'm going to deal with the work or the toil or whatever it is. But if it's not really your value, you'll do the shortcut. That's what
right?
we've seen over and over again in organizations and governments.
Well, in other words, a shortcut to something that actually is of higher priority value than the stated value. So
Yeah.
people cut corners because they value something more than whatever is associated with integrity or pursuit of this particular course of action. So, in other words, it's not like they don't have any values, not
Yeah,
like
they
they have no
everybody has
principles.
values.
It's just
Yeah.
their perhaps implicit values rather than explicit values. Or perhaps these are not even their own authentic values that they can clearly understand and identify with, but something that got downloaded into their brains, into their consciousness through indoctrination or religious bringing or education or just media. And basically, a lot of folks who think they know their values actually know the values that have been given to them by other people. Literally living other people's dreams and aspirations instead of having their own authentic values.
Yeah, I mean, we see that all the time. I think it's sometimes interesting to watch how those things are different because people can believe they have a value, they can believe they have a virtue, they can believe they have a certain thing, but when they're under pressure, that's when you actually see what their true values are. So pressure to me is a mirror to understanding what your values actually are. When you just state the values, there's no pressure, right? I can say whatever I want to say at that point, but when I'm under pressure, that's when you see what I'm truly made of. And that's also, again, when we talk about military training, martial arts training, those are to create a sense of pressure so that you can see before you get into a real engagement what you're made of, what you would do. And then there's still that other level of actual engagement and real threat, real consequence that will show you even further what you're really made of and what your values actually are.
For sure. Yes, those who have it easy in training usually don't live long in battle. The ones who do better in battle are the ones sweating bullets and shedding a lot of blood and tears during training. We learn through trial and error, and that's one of the things that most people want to avoid. They don't want to reinvent the wheel. They want to take somebody's wheel. Look, oh, I have this really convenient wheel. Let's just use it and basically don't experience the toil, don't experience the struggle. And without struggle, nobody becomes resilient. Nobody becomes grit. They don't develop grit. And so that's essentially the key to peak performance. Many peak performance experts and performers push themselves into exhaustion in the name of mastery. Now, from your experience, Sheldon, What's the difference between discipline training and the self-destructing drive to perform?
Yeah, I've dealt with that. As a filmmaker, I almost killed myself for a project. I literally got into a really terrible accident.
A former
But
stuntman and bodyguard, I can totally relate to that. Trying to perform.
yeah, yeah. And it was because I was pushing myself too hard. I was trying to do too many things at one time. And
Hmm.
what I learned about myself was that my energy is such that I have all of this stuff welling up inside me, and then I have this big explosion of energy. And then there's this recoil where now I have to gather myself again and build up again. And it takes a long time. And so that to me was unsustainable. And so what I realized is engines have explosions. They're timed explosions and they're small explosions. But in that coordination of those timed explosions, you can have sustained
Motion.
movement and locomotion. And so what I started to do was not to push myself towards some big explosion, work on consistency as opposed to just trying to get something done, fall ill, and then have to recover and then try to push myself to do some big thing. So now it's more like,
That would
what's
be
the small.
the recipe for a burnout.
Yeah, that's exactly. And so and it's funny using the word explosion because that's what happens. You'll just burn everything up and then there'll be nothing left. Instead, I started to meter myself, curb my enthusiasm, but remain consistent and diligent and also not getting discouraged because I have some false expectation or idea in my head about what something should be. Becoming more present to the moment and being here now and recognizing where I am with it. My goal is instead of being this great thing at some point in life, to just become better than I was yesterday.
Brilliant. Well, that's exactly the teachings of Qi where we value baby steps more than large leaps. And when people take large leaps, they often end up landing someplace where they wish they didn't land.
Right.
Or,
You talked about it in the stress response as an
yes,
example. Mhm.
exactly. Overstretching or overtraining or overpromising or doing anything that is basically pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone because most of our dreams and aspirations reside outside of our comfort zones. So that's pretty natural for us to think, I need to push myself or I need to stretch myself a little bit. And of course, that leads to stretch reflex, pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, which is where discomfort and pain lives, in addition to your dreams and aspirations. Now, what do we do? Taking small steps, baby steps, as I call them, enables you to experience the journey in a much more meaningful and manageable way, in a way that you can adjust the direction, or you can slow down or speed up as needed, as opposed to when you're leaping, you just committed to flying through the air. If you're literally leaping, there is no way to change direction, there is no way to go back or speed up. You are just following the trajectory. And where you land, well, that's why you hope that is going to be a better place than where you launched from. The grass is always greener on the other side, so it looks like it's going to be a better place. But then when you land there, it may turn out to be not so great. The reason why so many people go through the cyclical crisis of leaping, landing somewhere where they wish they didn't land, then retreating, recuperate, recharge, lick their wounds, or regroup, and then do it again because, well, they haven't manifested their dream yet, so they need to push themselves harder. It's like if you're stretching, oh, I'm not so flexible, I need to stretch more. I'm having a stretch reflex. That only leads to adding insult to injury.
Yeah. And I think there's something valuable about incremental change. When you couple that with presence and gratitude, then you're not thinking that grass is greener over there. No, there's green right here that I'm experiencing right now. I only need to know what I need to know when I need to know it. For instance, I've been studying Chinese for a very long time, and I'm not proficient in some way that I can speak super fluently. Now, can I go to China and make it there? Yes, I've proven to myself twice that I could go there, I can order food, I can shop, I can do some of those things. But what I work on is what do I need to know? Do I need to just learn shopping words? Where is the bathroom? I'll continue to learn words as I go along, but I don't need to try to boil the ocean and try to learn the entire language, which even native speakers don't know the entire language.
Right.
People that speak English don't know the entire English language. You have to look in the dictionary to understand what these words mean or the context of them. I've learned the same thing in software development. Every 5 minutes, there's some new programming language or something you need to learn, and it's too much. Instead of getting caught in the flavor of the month, what do I need to know right now? And that's where I spend my time building mastery and awareness over that thing. Then I can move on to the next thing once I have that under my belt. Some people will say that's too slow, but it's much faster than trying to learn everything.
Well, we know about jack of all trades, right? Never
Master of
becomes
none.
master of none.
Yeah. And so what I try to do is look at the core fundamentals. Programming is probably one of the easiest ones because there's lots of different programming languages. And you would ask yourself, well, why would you learn this one over this one? Well, generally, they all function exactly the same way. They all have the same underlying principles. So learn those principles instead of learning those languages. And then when you need to do a specific task, that programming language is better for that task. But guess what? It still follows
Mhm.
the same principles. So all I have to do is understand the principle of trying to do this. One example is that every single programming language has that because that's also a nature of reality, and all programming languages are based off of some kind of reality model. And so what is the condition? How do I say a condition here and how do I say it there? And that's what I mean by principles. Same thing with language. Everybody has a greeting. How do I say hello to people? How do I ask, how are you? Everybody has these things. So I don't have to really learn everything. I have to learn the thing that I need to know in order to do the thing that I need to do.
Being clear of values helps a great deal because then you focus primarily on how do I satisfy my values through my particular field of studies or learning. That is what allows you to uphold your values and enjoy your values being satisfied, which is essentially the key to a living, fulfilling life.
Yeah, and those things will build on each other. When you do that, you've built something, then whatever you do after that builds off of that. And so it really
Yeah,
comes down to having a strong foundation. That's where values are like that foundation that allows you to build. If you have a shaky foundation, then everything will come tumbling down under pressure or inquiry.
for sure. Yes. One of the questions that I have for you is that your programs are known for being beginner friendly. Obviously, most people who sign up for classes are novices. However, they also can challenge advanced practitioners. And I wonder how you design learning environments so that they would meet people where they are without watering your teachings down.
Yeah, I have a saying that at advanced kung fu is the basics done. Advanced qigong is the basics done well. Anything that's advanced is built off of something very basic and fundamental. If you're more advanced, I can go through the basics, make sure that we have that solid, and then from that we can extrapolate. And then the same understanding, I can go to a basic person and just work on the fundamentals. What they'll see in the advanced person is that extrapolated on, but I can point to this is the fundamental of that movement or that idea or that concept. So it's a building block. For us in our art, a lot of things are fundamentals of yin and yang, some kind of pushing, pulling, right? Like I could just ask somebody, where's the push? Where's the pull?
For sure.
Where's the up? Where's the down? So I think that makes it something deep. Also, when you're at an advanced level, when you go back to the basics, after you've gotten to this like high level, you see even more possibility there. I found that a lot of my friends that do jujitsu, they get so good at all this advanced stuff, and then they get beat by somebody who just does the basics really good.
Right.
Right? They're like, oh yeah, I got to go back to the basics. You
Yes.
know,
That is really a good point. I think it was Bruce Lee who said something to the effect that I'm not afraid of someone who does 10,000 different kicks. I'm afraid of someone who does the same kick 10,000 times.
exactly.
Now, If someone commits to a serious path of personal mastery, not just a quick fix, what should they realistically expect in the first year of the training, and what would keep people from straying from the course?
Well, I think people need to see success in those basics, in those
Mhm.
fundamentals as they go through their first year. My goal is to show somebody pretty quickly. I can even show somebody how to have success with the basics in their first class. I'm not talking about all this advanced stuff, but those basics are pretty mind blowing because people don't really understand how they work. We relate to the universe as working a certain type of way, and that's because we've only interacted with it a certain type of way. And so when we pull back the curtain a little bit and show that functioning of how everything works is a lot different than how you're perceiving it, just by adjusting your perception, you start to see more possibilities and capabilities. And a lot of those things are seem uncanny to people. They're always like, what is this? This is just how things work, and you can test it
Magic.
out. I'm always dissuading people from the whole magic conversation because a lot of people love the idea of magic and it's cool, but it's better to understand how things actually work. It seems miraculous when you see them in play. That's what I've learned from all of my really good instructors. And I think the one thing that I take away from people like yourself has always been test everything.
Absolutely.
And then that gives you more levels of mastery, and then test it against different types of scenarios. Stress test this thing against something else. Okay, you got this move down on somebody this size. Now do it on somebody a different size and
Yes.
see what adjustments you have to make. But where do the principles show up?
And not only the size, but also different backgrounds. Somebody with a background in Taekwondo is going to challenge you in one way. Somebody in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is going to challenge you in a completely different way. And that's just in the context of martial arts. In the context of other aspects of self-mastery development, we need to consider everything as a test, everything as an opportunity to either test ourselves or accept a challenge and stand up to it. Well, if we feel confident enough. If we don't feel confident enough, we'll own up to it and come back to it when you feel more confident. In other words, everything is a test. And that is how I personally practice everything. So there is no failure. It's just a feedback. It's just another signal that you get. What are you going to do about it? Do you connect the dots between cause and effect? If you do, then none of that is failure. It's just simply an exploration. And that's how we look at all the practices.
Right. It's just simply more understanding. That's the point of testing, right? It's only failed if you were egotistically attached to a result.
Right.
When I move away from that, I'm more attached to the nature of how something works. It doesn't have to be this way. It's like, oh, I thought this would lead to that. This gave me more information. It doesn't lead to that all the time. So what are the things that I have to do in order to make that happen?
Yeah. In other words, it's actually refinement of your map of reality. As Alfred Korzybski put it, the map does not match the territory in most cases. And a lot of people follow the map instead of the territory.
Right.
And if we update the map on a regular basis, there's going to be less discrepancy between the map and territory. So we can actually trust our map or trust our understanding of how things work because we've tested over and over again, kept updating things. And if there is some discrepancy, it's rather minor.
Exactly. And I like that kind of view on reality. I'm trying to update my understanding consistently so that my map is matching my reality. I think that's a great way of putting it. How many people have died because GPS gave them the wrong information? They went off of an off ramp that was under construction because it said to go this way, So it actually is crucial for you as a human being to continue to update your map of reality.
Yes, and if it's not GPS, but it's the mental map of how we think things work, or how we think people operate, or how we think business is done, if our map does not match territory, we are going to be constantly operating at a faulty level of function. In other words, we'll be malfunctioning.
Yeah.
That's
And
the
that's a
opposite of
scientific
mastery.
method. Yeah, that's the scientific method. It's like I have an hypothesis, I test it, and then I update my hypothesis. as opposed to I have this hypothesis and I think it's the gospel. That's
Mm.
difference. When somebody says science says this right now, science might be saying something later because it now got better information. That's the idea of it, is when you get better information, then you update your map, as you say.
Yeah, well, that's the difference between science and religion.
Mhm. Religion tends to try to stay staunch in a concept and keep this for the duration of time instead of updating its understanding as it gets better information.
Right. A lot of religions pride themselves for being orthodox, sticking with old truths or old school thinking, as opposed to science. I don't think any real scientists would pride themselves for being orthodox because it
That
means
wouldn't
they're
work out
just
too
stuck
well.
in last century.
That's a good example. That's a good example.
Wonderful. Well, Sheldon, before we wrap up, tell us about Mastery Dojo, the project that you and I are about to birth. What is it that our listeners and viewers would be able to get out of it?
Yeah, I think the myriad of different perspectives. We have this large collective of people, interviews, opportunities for people to connect around the topic of mastery. Having peers and community is always the best way of getting mastery in a subject or a topic because you have accountability, energy, people that are talking about this. And so Mastery Dojo is going to fulfill all of those type of things. The masters that are in Mastery Dojo are incredible, their information, their pedigree, and now we're opening that to other people. So they'll be able to tap into this vast resource of mastery on their own journey as well. Get some of the best insights from some of the best in the world stuff.
Right. Yeah, we literally have who is who directory of several hundred masters. And also we have a tremendous number of members who are may not be masters, but maybe up and coming masters or practitioners. Each and every one of them comes from some interesting perspective. They have something to share. There's something that they can contribute and also keep us accountable. The accountability piece is something that in most circles, when it comes to Qigong, Tai Chi, or any other martial arts, often is the missing link. Often people say, what I'm struggling with is consistency. Well, there's difficulty maintaining consistency if we don't have any accountability. Very few people have enough self-discipline to keep themselves consistent. If we have some degree of accountability, consistency is a lot easier to come by. And we have another layer of accountability, literally accountability practitioners, coaches that offer this as a service. And not only human coaches, we also have AI coach. We have an avatar of yours truly that actually provides some coaching. And also, of course, if you need human coaching or human touch, the AI coach will be able to refer you to a human coach or practitioner. And we also have tremendous amount of other resources, be that our newsletters, recordings of all the online summits that we've put together. I started doing that in 2012, so it's been quite a few summits and also even more seasons of the Secrets of Qigong Masters, all compiled into seasons on certain topics. A dozen seasons that are going to be available not all at once, but rolling out. And to add to that, also dozens of online courses.
Yeah, so it's going to be full of really great material. Much of the material is just timeless. It was relevant if we shot it a long time ago and still today. And then we're continuing to interview masters. We're continuing to do workshops and summits.
And let me remind our viewers and listeners, you have just enjoyed the interview with Sheldon Callahan, featured as our Master of the Month, dedicated to mastery. That's the topic of Mastery Dojo. It's the topic of our upcoming summit that's happening in April of 2026.